Hey, welcome back to the Full Cycle YouTube channel. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be looking at doing some mag-neg bands and volume spacers in this RockShox shock. All right, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we'll just take our travel indicator off, set that down on the desk. We're going to pull the air valve cap off and release the air pressure from the shock. And then this shock here has a mag-neg, so we first have to take off this mag-neg air sleeve before we can actually unthread the whole can. So I'm going to use a metal pick. You want to be really careful not to damage this O-ring. So I'm just going to go in above it and just twist down to kind of dig it out a little bit. And I'm forcing with both my fingers to push this ring forward, so you can kind of see that happen here. And I'm just going to pop that off. Again, set that aside. And then pull this mag-neg off. So, see, we got no bands in there, and the guy riding this shock was complaining that he didn't have enough support off the top. So what we'll do is add some, we're just going to go ahead and add all 4 bands, in fact, which is going to reduce the negative air volume, and it's going to be a little bit more supportive off the top of the stroke. The other thing that the rider of this shock wanted done was a little bit more support at the end of the stroke. So what we're going to do before we pop those bands on, I've got the shock in the vise here, and I'm going to unthread the air can, and we're going to put in some air volume spacers. And what that's going to do is give the shock a little bit more ramp up towards the end of the stroke. This is pretty tight. Obviously I got a vise and everything. But if your shock is too tight to be done by hand, you can also use a strap wrench, which I don't currently have in the studio, but we'll link a little clip to our shock service video where you can see a demo of that done. All right, so we're gonna lift this guy here up. It's kind of difficult to reach in there with my fingers. And it looks like we've got 2 volume spacers in there. So I'm going to add a third one here. So these guys here just slide over, and then we just press them down there. So on the Super Deluxe, the maximum number of spacers we can have is 3 spacers. Any more than that, and they're going to start acting as a travel spacer. So your shock stroke is going to start to be reduced if you keep piling those up. So with that in place, now we can pop this guy here back on. I'm going to slide that down and thread that in place. And as with the shock service video where I mentioned that before, you don't want to use the strap wrench to tighten this in place. Doing it by hand is tight enough. The strap wrench is handy as an emergency tool to be able to break it free, but after the strap wrench there's no extra means of wrenching it off, so you definitely don't want to use the maximum amount of force to put this thing on. So now that we've got the air can threaded back on, we're ready to get all of these mag-neg bands onto the shock. All right, so we're just going to pop these guys on one at a time. And again, we're going with all 4 because this rider really needs a lot more top end support from the shock. All right, now with all of those guys on, we're ready to put this thing on. Easiest way to tell if it's upright, the label, the words are upright. That way you can read them the same way. So we're just gonna slide that guy there in, and then you can line up the seam in the sticker with the reservoir. And then we just take this big band and just snug it over. And then I just kind of run my thumb around it, or a finger, and just kind of press that into that groove. That way it holds that guy on. And then the travel indicator, and then we're ready to pump the shock back up and get it on the bike. And there you have it. We've tuned the shock with some mag-neg bands and volume spacers, and now you guys are hopefully ready to hit the trails again. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and catch us next time.